Hi, good evening again. It's Monday night, and I'm going to talk now about the assignment in particular. The assignment, which is an analysis of an advertisement. And I'm going to do it by showing you an assignment that a group of students did last semester together because they were doing a group assignment. We're doing an individual. And let me show you the advertisement. There's two sides, but they chose the other side. But I want to show you both sides because they're interesting. So here's a picture. It's for Armani, for a fragrance, and you see this couple, okay, dressed very expensively, very well-to-do looking couple, and he's holding her in his arms. Now we see on the other side another part of their life. Here they are at the pool side of their very luxurious building, where they're on the rooftop deck, and they have a pool, and it says, the text below says, the new fragrance for men, Giorgio Armani, Armani Sport Code. So what we have to do with this kind of an assignment is we have to deconstruct it, or we have to figure out why did the Armani brand decide to do it this way. After all, it's Armani Sport Code. They could have had a couple, male, female, if they wanted. They could have been skiing, right? They could have been wearing huge winter coats or ski gear, ski apparel. But no, they decided to do something very different. So now, the first question that the students had to address: what is the overall message being communicated? So that was their immediate, the immediate impact that the ad has. And what they said is this: the message being conveyed is that the Armani fragrance can attract females and enable the buyer to feel very sexy, very masculine, and classy. So they captured all the essential details in a very brief way. Obviously, again, this idea of sexiness, because they decided to show them in the pool, not wearing, hardly dressed, is important. That the brand has felt that that would be captivating to the audience, to this male audience for whom it's directed. The idea of masculinity is very important because, again, it's a masculine fragrance. We have a situation which is very interesting. If you take a note of it, notice how the couple relates to each other, right? Who's the one in this couple who has more power? We seem to, I think it indicates that by the posture and by the positioning, the fact that he is standing taller, she's not only in a lower position in the photo, but she's also looking to the side, which indicates a kind of submission or shyness, depending on how we interpret it. So this is an interesting element, and I think it would be very difficult for you to find a photograph, an advertisement, where you see something other than this kind of position, right? Where the man is in the central, more authoritative, more powerful posture. You see how he's taller and she's below him, right? And so in fact in the old movies, I forget which movie star it was, Clark Gable maybe, who was not tall, and many times the leading ladies were taller than he was, and so he would, because the mythology in the Hollywood film of that time was that the male had to be a few inches taller than the female. And so, and he had to have broad shoulders, had to have, a kind of a different physique and a different kind of orientation, more powerful, more authoritative than the female. And so he would stand on boxes and cartons because he had to, again, when he had these romantic scenes, he should have been taller than her so he could embrace her. So this is part of the mythology that would seem very different for us if we saw the reverse. Not that in real life, sometimes we do find the reverse, that a woman can be taller than her husband, for example. But the mythology is such that the ideal couple has an imbalance in that way, and that represents authority on the part of the male. And Irving Goffman, a sociologist, and we talked a little bit about him when we talked about symbolic interaction. He's written a book actually analyzing advertisements, and in that book he talks about and he documents many photos where you will see that exact configuration of the male above the female in position, photographed larger than the female, to show that he's more important. So the second question: what symbols are being used to communicate the messages? words, models, products, props, background, etc. Okay, so the students wrote, the symbols being used are the lack of clothing that shows off the ideal body type for both the male and the female. The background of the city shows that the two people in the ad live in a high-end place, flaunting their affluence, which most people would desire. The sensuality of the woman in the advertisement is also used to attract a male buyer. So again, that's a very good observation. And I mentioned something else that perhaps they should look into, and that they didn't mention. Notice, I don't know if it's easy for you to see it here, but can you notice in the corner that she has a tattoo? So we see just in a little bit of that tattoo of writing on her back, on her lower back. And so that indicates, I mentioned to them to think about that aspect as well, because that's part of just like the words, just like the text, the fact that they decided to put a tattoo, the fact they decided to have short hair versus long hair, there's all different, maybe we can't interpret everything, but the tattoo is probably a very significant decision on the part of the company. And probably they wanted to show that she's to make her more mysterious, to show that she is somehow non-conforming. Because tattoos generally indicate that the person who has a tattoo is, again, somehow not extremely conservative. In some religious traditions, for example, tattooing is forbidden. And it's certainly not something in the past that women were ever allowed to do, tattoos. I mean, men, sailors, and perhaps in the army, soldiers had tattoos. These were working class, rough men. So this is not something feminine. So for most of, let's say, American history, it was not acceptable. So it's still a little bit transgressive, just like when women didn't smoke and they started to smoke, that was a sign of being liberated or of going against convention. It's the same way the tattoo has that connotation. Maybe less today than obviously in the past, but it still has the connotation. Think about it, in a Ralph Lauren advertisement, are you likely to see a female with a tattoo? Probably, certainly not. Okay, so then in the second version, when they resubmitted it, this is what they wrote. The woman in the ad is subtly displaying the tattoo on her back. This is a sign of nonconformity and shows a sense of boldness or even badness in her. Even with that, the man in the ad still has power over her from the position in which he is standing, and with which she tilts her head, showing a sense of submission. So I think that's not a bad analysis. That, again, maybe it can be interpreted differently. You have to think about it, but I think that, again, it's an advertisement for men, for perfume, and it's trying to convey maybe a fantasy that at least maybe a good proportion of the male population might have. Not everyone. And also it seems more normal to us. If it were the reverse, it would be shocking, right? If the man were looking down and the man were tilting his head like that, and she were looking straight on at him, standing naked above him, that would be much more shocking for many people. Okay, for number 3, how are the symbols being used to convey the message? How are they manipulated? The appearance of the models, their expressions, makeup, gestures, posture, style of clothing. So I'm just giving you a few examples of things that you can look at to look at how. So we have the symbols there, right? We have a male and a female model, but how are they presented? Not just, you have to go a little more in depth. So not just looking at the surface, but trying to look a little more in depth at it. And let's see, they answer. The flaunting of the male body is trying to get the male consumer to look up to the male in the ad, and therefore to want to be more like him. The lack of clothing on the woman also conveys that he has already won her over, and therefore it further exemplifies the masculinity of the male in the ad, which is to say that the ad is trying to sell perfume to a man who wants to feel more secure about himself. So that's, I think, an interesting analysis.